All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session, Budget, Bookings, and Basic Travel Tips. We're really excited to have you all join us, and hopefully you get something out of this presentation, and we're really excited and happy to answer any questions that you have at the end. My name is Melissa Newton. I am the Program Coordinator for Tufts Global Education, and I am joined by our summer intern, Sid, if you would like to introduce yourself. You're muted.
Hi, I'm Sid. I'm sorry. For some reason, my Zoom last minute started messing up again. But I'm Sid. I'm the summer intern here. I will also be monitoring the chat. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in there. Really happy that everyone is here. And the session is being recorded, so you can keep your cameras off if you need to.
Great. And if you have a personal or private question that you want us to answer, I can't speak today. You can also send it directly to Sid, and we can answer it, anonymously, so nobody has to know, like, so and so asked this question. So let us begin the presentation. So basically, first we're going to go over money management and things to consider before you go abroad, such as additional costs when it comes to traveling. Many of you have probably already booked your flights for going overseas, where there are some things that you need to take in consideration that might happen at the airport, such as international flight changes and baggage fees. So double check to make sure that your ticket, if there is a checked bag that comes with the purchase of that ticket, or if there is an additional fee that you need to pay. Another thing to think about when you're going overseas to travel or anywhere is weight limits for your luggage. So check with the airline that you're flying with to make sure that, you can get up to 50 pounds or like 20 kilograms, depending on like what airline you're going on, and if there's going to be any extra fee, because sometimes that can cost anywhere between $35 to $100. So it's very important that you have that, maybe a few extra bucks on you, or have a debit or credit card handy just in case your luggage is overweight when you go to the airport. Another additional cost to consider is visas. Most of you going on programs abroad should have already started applying for visas if it's applicable, but some countries you may not have to get a visa to enter, but have to do some sort of limited residency application or card, and that also may have a fee associated with it. So making sure that if that's something that is covered by your program, or if it's something that you're going to need when you get there. Also, local transportation. Is it a very walkable city? Do you have to, take take the subway or the bus, or whatever kind of local transportation is provided? That's another cost that you should factor into where you're going to be. Some of the programs, they might provide a card for you to use for local transportation, or there might be a student discount depending on the university or program that you are in. So that's another thing that you should look into. Cultural activities and experiences. A lot of the times on either an external program or a Tufts program abroad, that's built into the programming. So there's different activities, but if there's anything else that you want to do, looking up in advance, seeing how much that costs, like say you want to go to a museum, do they have student discounts? Do they have free days? Looking into any sort of experience that may be free, like if there's a town festival or something, but there may be smaller costs like food or maybe tiny trinkets that you want to buy. So thinking about that and budgeting it out in advance is very important. I will say to make sure that for the Tufts programs abroad that you're taking advantage of that cultural reimbursement. So say if you're a student in London and you go to a soccer match, or you go to the opera while you're in Madrid or something, and it's something in Spanish, we're not going to reimburse you for going to see a Marvel movie in English. But if you do something that is cultural or has something to do with the program and what you're doing there, then you can submit for a reimbursement for that activity. Other things to consider are, toiletries, medication, luggage, travel gear, things that you're going to need before you go. So I myself, when I pack, I use little travel cubes to kind of make sure that my clothes are more neatly organized and I can try and fit as much as possible in there, as well as toiletries. We encourage students to buy, enough for like their first couple of weeks or months. But, when you're there, if you're there for a semester or a year, you're going to need more soap, shampoos, etc., and making sure that you have funds on hand for those kind of personal expenses, as well as also researching what is available, because not all countries cater to the same kind of, cosmetic care that many of us use here in the US. And, you know, um, or maybe there's like some cultural differences in the things that you use, and that's something to consider, and making sure that you either can find what you need or you can order it or something like so. Looking or preparing in advance for those kind of expenses. um, Electronics, phone, SIM card converters. So while you are abroad, we do highly recommend that you have a working cellular device with a data plan and Wi-Fi. Please don't depend on just Wi-Fi only. If you have a smartphone, you need to be reachable in case of an emergency, and sometimes Wi-Fi isn't available everywhere, and sometimes just those free Wi-Fi things aren't necessarily always trustworthy or reliant. So make sure that you are prepared to either get an international plan while you're there, or many students purchase a small flip phone with a tiny data package, or pay by the minute plan and use their smartphone for Wi-Fi access while they're there. This way you remain reachable for your program directors or Tufts University or anything like that in case of an emergency. Make sure you look in advance for the additional cost of what that might be monthly for you if you're paying for your own cell phone bill, as well as if you're going to do a small data plan on like a flip phone, the cost of the phone plus the plan, etc., or getting a SIM card, or what it's going to take to unlock your phone, because most phones are regionally locked, and if you're going to a different region, you're going to have to get it unlocked, and that might mean going to a special service to get it done. Another thing that is important to think about is converters for electrical appliances. So, your chargers, your flat irons, curling irons, whatever else you use that you might plug into an electrical outlet. Voltages are different in many countries, as well as just like the prongs that we use to plug them in. So investing into a converter, if you're going to Europe or East Asia or something like that, is very important. Another additional cost that students might not think about is travel during breaks or on the weekends. I highly encourage you to explore the country that you're in. It's a much cheaper option than trying to like fly to Paris on the weekend from Madrid. There are so many beautiful regions and places to visit in your home country, and that's one way to cut down on cost, is exploring very local places. And this is another great way to be fully immersed in the culture and really feel like a part of a community, instead of like leaving on the weekends. But if you do plan to travel on the weekends to other places, which is another great way to see the world and experience things, please try to factor in that cost of like that plane ticket or train ticket and going away for the weekend, hotels, Airbnbs, hostels, whatever you choose to use. And then last, we kind of talked about personal items that you're going to need while you're there that you may not have access to order online or anything like that. Another thing to consider is what is covered by the program. So what's included? Are your meals included? Is it twice a day? Is it 3 times a day? Is it only one meal? Are you going to have to pay for any extra meals out of pocket if it's not covered by the program? Is there a monthly or weekly stipend that's given out by the program? And if so, figuring out how much that is and how it's going to cover all of your expenses, and if you can find a way to make sure that you are able to maybe put a little bit aside so you can do some weekend travel. Housing versus rent, all of that things. So if your housing is included in the program, or if you have to pay rent out of the stipend, just making sure that you're budgeting appropriately. So I'm going to throw it over to Sid, who is going to take over.
Yeah, so can you change the slide? Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So another thing is planning ahead, which is very important. So essentially, your program generally will give you an idea of how much money you will be spending. And it's very important to go through that information because that's sort of been researched and is already there for you. Um, Other than that, a few other things that you want to keep in mind, especially with like researching things, is like what is the exchange rate of the country, like the currency of that country, how does it compare to your home country or the dollar if you're from the US? And just know that that will fluctuate. So a big thing is if there's ATM fees for you to take out money from your card internationally, because a lot of credit cards and debit cards both have that. And then another thing you can think of is you can contact your bank and ask them how your current credit card slash debit card works for international use. A lot of banks also offer a foreign exchange card where you can load up money in a different currency and take it from the US. And that could be a good way of like reaching there and not having to worry about, the constantly fluctuating exchange rate, whereas you've already like locked in, you have that money in that currency. Another big thing is COVID testing locations and best prices for that. I think a lot of countries, it might not be as easy to find free testing. It might be harder to find certain types of tests. It might be, harder to find testing in smaller locations. So always keeping in check, like where you can get COVID tested in case you have a scare or in case you want to travel and you need a COVID test for that. Another thing is planning ahead, which is very important, being like creating a budget and sticking to it, making sure that that's a realistic budget, that you can live within that money. And also just know that there will be certain things you need to budget for, that's like living expenses, that are food, transport, stuff like that. And then also make sure that you want to have fun there, you are there to have an experience, so make sure you also budget for going to places, seeing the culture in that city or that area, and traveling within, like Melissa said, because that's like an important part of your experience abroad. A good way to sort of keep track of these expenses can obviously be using Excel sheets or Google Sheets. You can use formulas. They're like templates online for budgeting where you can just put in the information, automatically calculate things for you. You can also have apps like Mint, which help you like track, but there are like so many out there. Another thing is like using these like Excel sheets or whatever you're using to track your budget, like using that and then reviewing it every month, so you're sure that you're not going over by like a certain amount every month. Maybe you keep like a limit as like, I can't cross this. I think that really helps. And if you did overspend, just think about how you can save the month after that, or maybe where was that where you overspend, maybe that was a one-time cost and wouldn't happen again. But it would really help because that can streamline your money, can streamline your process. It'll be easier, less stress. You're already in a different country, so you don't want to worry about everything else. Yeah, I think another. Oh, it's fine. I
So
think we
sorry
were.
about that. Zoom, the presentation got ahead of itself. I do want to just put out there that in terms of planning ahead, be sure to read all materials carefully that are sent to you from your program provider or from Tufts Programs Abroad, because often we do send you info on monthly cost and personal and programmatic spending that students have done in the past. So I know many of our Tufts Programs Abroad have sent out information on monthly costs that students have spent, and approximation of like how much money you should plan to bring with you outside of the monthly or weekly whatever stipend that comes with your program. So again, be sure to make sure you read all materials carefully and are in contact with your program provider or program director in terms of money. And if you have questions about what is the average cost of like food or cheap dining accommodations for students, because like in Paris there are many cheap dining options like University Cafe is what they're called, I do believe. And you can go and spend €2 to €5 and have like a very good full meal from there. So just using all resources that are available to you to help you plan ahead.
Okay, yeah, sorry, Zoom lagged a bit for me, but I'm here now. So another big thing is about like getting foreign currency and how you would do that. And a really big thing is different currency, like websites and services work differently. All of them have different fee. Some of them have an extra, just like currency exchange fee, which is not the like general just like fee you're supposed to pay. So they're going to have an added fee. So make sure you're avoiding that extra fee because a lot of services don't have that. So make sure you go to your bank, the one that you use, talk to them, ask them what their exchange rates are. You can compare them with other services, or you can also use credit unions. Generally, these will give you the best rate. Your bank also, because you kind of had an account with them, probably has, again, a foreign exchange card or something like that. That would really help for you. Another thing you can do is use your bank's ATMs abroad as well. You can search Global ATM Alliance partners to see like which ones work for your US bank. So sometimes US banks have partnerships with other institutions in foreign countries, so you don't get ATM fee while taking out money. A good example of this is also like Citibank, for example. If people use that, like some countries have a lot of Citibank ATMs and they forego your international fee if you take money out that way. Although you should always check with your bank because sometimes they're specific to the kind of account you have as well. And also another thing is important is like you can talk to your bank and see if they'll buy back the foreign currency that you have left when you return. So then you essentially don't end up wasting that money, and you don't have to worry about taking too much money there in case you don't spend it, because you have this assurity that when you come back, they will transfer it back to you. Another thing is currency exchange agencies. So there are specific businesses that will just exchange currency. And so basically you can also do this when you reach the whole like country you're going to, or you can do this in the US where you can just exchange currency right then and there with the business. Another thing you can do similarly, like a lot of these businesses have booths at the airport. But airport currency exchanges should be your last resort because they are generally much more expensive than all the other options. Just because they're at the airport, they know they're going to get that business. But if you're in an emergency, like let's say you have a layover, you need to eat food, that's fine. If you can't use your ATM card, take out money or to pay for that food or whatever, and you like really need money and the only options in ATM exchange, you can do that. Sometimes they're not that bad also, but mostly you should avoid them because they will take more fee than all the other options. Yeah, and also a lot of places, especially if you're talking about places in Europe, they are going towards becoming more and more cashless. So remember that you might not have like options to use cash in a lot of things. Mostly this happens in like public transport. Sometimes they don't have place for you to give cash, so you'll have to get like a public transport card or use your card or use like Apple Pay or Google Pay or like whatever phone service you have. A big thing of this is just know that if you're using a debit card or credit card abroad, there will be a fee per transaction. Again, you can talk to your bank and get specific cards that don't have that fee, or like maybe your account already is that kind of account, maybe you already have that kind of credit card. So definitely like check with your bank, see what benefits you get with the card that you currently have. Generally a foreign transaction fee is typically 1 to 3%. So essentially it's like 1% or like 1 to 3% of like the total, how much ever transaction it is. So the bigger the transaction, the more money you're losing essentially. But also sometimes it's more with certain banks, so you really have to be careful, especially I think like smaller banks that tends to happen. Another thing is there's an ATM fee, which is just like a flat fee where like and it clearly it happens domestically also. You might be familiar with it. Like if you use your debit card at like an ATM, which is not your ATM, you would get like a fee, generally $3 to $5. So it's like additional to even the foreign transaction fee sometimes, and you have to be careful about that. Again, you can talk to your bank to see how much it is. Generally, you will be paying at least one of these fee. Like there's sometimes like you can't get around it. So just it's good to always just account for that when you are trying to spend money, but also just make sure you have enough cash to spend so you don't have to take out money a lot internationally, because every time it will be a cost. Um, again, you can find credit cards with no foreign transaction fee. But again, you just have to like always be sure, talk to your bank, make sure they don't have an ATM fee or a foreign transaction fee. They probably will have one. Realistically, most of them do, but you can find options.
Yes, and it's very important to just be aware of those international ATM fees. So say your parents put $500 into your bank account and then you decide to withdraw all that $500, leaving you with a balance of zero. You're still going to have to pay that additional ATM fee. So if it's $5, now you are negative $5 in your account. And banks being banks, if you're already negative that $5, they may also charge you an overdraft fee as well. And continue to charge you those overdraft fees until it's fixed and you have cleared up your balance in your account. I'm speaking from personal experience as a teenager living in Japan and not thinking about these fees. So just be mindful of how much you're taking out if there's a fee involved, because you don't want to end up having a zero or negative balance.
Yeah. Another thing that I just realized is you also get that foreign transaction fee a lot of times on apps like Uber and Lyft. And that's something a lot of times you like don't realize. So just keep that in mind if you're using your like cards that are not of that country for those apps, because you will incur a foreign transaction fee of 1 to 3% in those apps. And a lot of other similar like service-based apps will have that.
Yes. A lot of times if you eat out at a restaurant and they come around with the little card reader and you put it in, it may ask you, do you want to pay for this in euro or do you want to pay for this in US dollars? And you have to think about like what is going to be best based on like conversion rates, or if there is a transaction fee, etc. So these are good things to keep in mind. Okay. So last but not least, when you're just thinking about, preparing and budgeting, we want to make sure that you, again, purchase enough toiletries to start you off, unless there are certain things that you may need that you don't feel that you will be able to get in another country. Me, as a woman of color, there are certain hair products that I can find and are easily accessible here in the US that maybe when I go to Europe, or especially like a smaller town in Europe, I might not be able to find those. So researching in advance, like, can I use a foreign website, or like, Amazon Germany, although I don't really want to promote, so seeing how you can get that, because like those things do take up a lot of space and weight. So if you have a family member who can also perhaps send that to you while you're there, or a friend who's willing to send it for you, if you already have it like set up in a box and like, all right, every 2 months, send this to me, here's the money to do it. That's just something to think about. Make sure your passport, visa, acceptance letters for your program and university, if applicable, are easily accessible at the airport in case you need to present those when you're trying to do any sort of transaction or get money out. It's just important to have like your identification available, and also have the international SOS insurance information handy as well, in case there's some sort of medical emergency. This way, this is the emergency health insurance that is covered by TUS, so you don't have to worry about having to submit a claim or pay out of pocket necessarily right there if there's an emergency. Shop where local shop. Please try to avoid tourist areas and high-priced restaurants as much as possible. So like if you're in Paris and you're on the Champs-Élysées, like maybe try a side, not alley, but like a side street or something that's off of the main tourist area. Once you start to make friends and hang out with locals, they'll also tell you the places to shop and eat, so you're not spending a lot of money. when you're calculating your budget, try to estimate higher. It's always better to overestimate than to underestimate, because surprise, then you have a little bit of extra money to spend or save or do whatever you like with. Again, you'll more than likely buy souvenirs and little trinkets for yourself, friends, family, things to bring back with you for your memories of your time abroad. So also budgeting and planning to spend a little money more than usual during your last weeks abroad. Typically when people start to remember, oh yeah, I have family, I need to buy them a gift. Another important detail is tell your bank that you'll be abroad. Usually in your app like Bank of America or Citizens, you can let them know that you will be traveling overseas between this date and this date. And if you don't have the app or don't know how to do that online, you can call your bank and let them know. Because if you're suddenly, in Connecticut for the last year, and then they see transactions in Zurich or something like that, they may close your account or freeze your account until they can verify with you. And if you don't have a phone set up or something, it may take a little while to get that resolved, and you may not have access to your money or funds. So it's very important that before you go abroad, you let your banks know. Bring a backup card if possible. If you have a credit card or a second credit card or a debit card, just having backup card is important in case you lose the first one or it gets frozen for some reason. Keep your passport separate from your bank cards. Again, in case of any sort of emergencies or you lose one, you don't lose your identification, something that's going to help you to actually get your funds or get your credit card back or something like that. Don't carry a lot of cash around with you, especially if you're in a tourist area. This is just for your own safety and security, because there are professional like pickpockets out there that do target tourists. And as much as we think like, oh, I'm blending in, I'm dressing like everybody else around here, they've been doing this for a long time, and they can pick up on like who is not from the area. And so if they see you like flashing a lot of cash while you're trying to like buy something, it may potentially make you a target of theft. So trying to not carry a lot of cash and like spreading it out on you where it is, just in case like someone does get you in a pocket, you have something in your purse or in your back pocket or in your shoe wherever you decide to put it. And also be careful at the ATM. Use ATMs that are in well-lit, highly populated areas. Please try to just use ATMs that are at banks. Maybe don't do the one that's in the bar or at the back of a restaurant or in a club or something like that, because more than likely they will have a high transaction fee, and they could also just be very shady. So just be careful of the ATMs and where you're going to get your money. So another important thing to think about when going abroad and traveling during this time of COVID is your health, safety, and security details beforehand. So making sure you get a pre-flight negative test. We recommend doing the PCR test and not the rapid testing, because a lot of airlines will require the PCR test in order to clear you for the flight before you go abroad. I would also highly recommend researching and reviewing what is required by the airline that you are flying on. And if you're going through two different airlines, so you book through American Airlines and then you're going to go through Lufthansa for your second flight, just making sure that you are up to date and aware what each airline requires as far as testing. So does it need to be 3 days in advance, 2 days in advance, etc., for when you get your negative COVID test back. And another thing that we had mentioned earlier is considering the cost of testing when you're traveling. So what is covered by your program? So if you're in a test program abroad, we will assist you with program related COVID testing. So when you arrive, helping to cover for the cost or quarantine that is associated with the program. If you're doing, your own private travel, you're responsible for the COVID testing that is necessary if you're going off for a weekend or for a holiday break. We won't be providing funds for that. And it's the same thing if you're on external program provider, just knowing what is covered by them as far as testing and what is the responsibility of the student, as well as familiarize yourself with country-specific travel guidelines and regulations. Again, the airport might require that you have a test that is, 3 days in advance with a negative test, but as if you're entering a country, they might have 2 days in advance. So just making sure that you're doing everything so that it is in alignment with all the regulations for when you travel. Being prepared while you're abroad. So always carry your vaccine card. I would suggest making some photocopies of it as well to have as a backup, having a picture of it on your phone. I laminated mine just to make sure that nothing happens to it. So carry your vaccine card, have backups of it, have a photo of it. It's very important because you may be asked to present it at any time during your travels. Buying TSA approved sanitizers and wipes for your flight. So you know that, liquids 3 ounces or under in a clear plastic baggie. When you bring that with you to the airport, I recommend having just some hand sanitizer and maybe a small packet of Lysol wipes, as well as wear a mask. It is required for travel. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. All the airports say you need to wear a mask, so please wear a mask. And I suggest bringing extras. You never know what might happen if you get water or something, or you don't want to wear a wet mask, but just having extras in case you leave yours somewhere is always good to be prepared. So, planning your trip. We just kind of want to talk about like planning for your time abroad, as well as planning for any side trips or journeys that you have. And a lot of students may think that they need to have like every single detail scheduled down to the last minute. And we think that spontaneity can lead to some of the most memorable experiences while you're abroad, but also having a good idea of what you want to do, where you're going, and a plan will cut down on like extra stress, maybe extra costs, and trying to figure out what you're doing in the host country or where you're traveling. I highly suggest maybe planning out the area that you intend to go to. You may not have a specific idea of what you're going to do that day, but just being aware of the location that you're going to be in is very helpful, making sure you don't get lost. GPS is available on all your phones. Google Maps may not work, but you can still pull up a map from the GPS and kind of get an idea of where you are. You can also preload maps into Google Maps for an area that you want to go to. So this is just very helpful for if you're going to be exploring and out on your own, just to make sure you kind of have an idea of how to get from your university or host family or apartment where you're staying to an area that you're going to. Keeping in mind while you're there, are you a guest or are you an ambassador? You have to recognize that the customs in the country can be different from your own and what you're used to here. So it's important that you remain respectful to the rules of the culture and host country that you're in, even if it's different from what you're used to. You don't want to be that person who's like, well, in America, we do it this way, and I don't understand why no one is doing it like this while I am in Amsterdam. That's because you're in Amsterdam, you're not in America anymore. So it's very important to don't be that person who expects everything to go the way that you're used to living your life, because that is a part of the experience, is doing something new, learning something new, being in a completely different environment with different people. That is part of the whole global experience. And this is definitely going to be a great chance for you to improve your intercultural communication skills. So we definitely recommend that, sit back, watch how people in your local community are interacting with each other and try to follow, the rules that you see set forth. Many of our test programs abroad, and well as external program providers, will definitely have some tips and tricks for, the culture that you're going to be in, as well as, some sessions on intercultural communications and relations. So we definitely think that you should, um, look to your program director or provider for guidance as well as resources. Um, and lastly, be prepared for the unexpected to happen. The last year and a half has definitely been challenging. There have been many twists and turns all around due to COVID, but in general, just travel. There are many things that may just pop up, and kind of already being in the mindset that like anything could happen, but I can roll with it is very just a good mindset to have, so that you aren't feeling extra stress or pressure when, a flight changes or delays, maybe trying to plan out. So if I'm supposed to meet my host family at this time and now I have a delay, instead of, stressing out, just be like, all right, I'm going to send them an email to let them know I won't be here at this time and to expect me at this, and maybe try to communicate if they're going to pick you up or arranging some sort of transportation. Just allow more time between traveling to prepare for any sort of unexpected time changes or, cancellation of plans.
Can I add to that just real quick? If you're traveling within or like internationally, like from that area, and you have like connecting flights, that make sure the time between those flights, especially if it's different carriers, isn't too short. Because like even if there are no delays, you can be delayed by like 10-15 minutes. I've seen it's happened to me where like um I've had really short, even same carrier changes where like 45 minutes or something. And first of all, that'll be a really stressful situation. 45 minutes is not enough for you to internationally change a flight, but also just making sure that you're accounting for how big like delays happening because of COVID in general. And also realizing another thing, when you were talking about the guest ambassador thing, I also realized making sure that you're respectful of COVID rules in that country, making sure, because a lot of countries during COVID aren't as open as America is really. There are definitely places where there will be smaller lockdowns. Maybe you can't go out on the weekends, maybe bars are closed, maybe. And so like ensuring that you're following those rules, even though that's not what we see here, because that is a very genuine health concern for those people.
All right, Sid is going to take over and talk about packing.
Yeah, so this is sort of the exciting part, because people like, I think it can be really overwhelming to sort of move your life to a different country, especially for a short period of time. You don't know what you want to pack. But I think the most important thing is make sure you're leaving enough buffer time before leaving. So like you're starting to pack sort of at least, a few weeks in advance, if not like at least a week in advance, if not more. So you already know what things you need. If you need to go out and buy something, you're not doing the last minute. If you have to order something online, it's delivered in that time before you leave. Make sure that the items you're taking for daily use, all of that, make sure you have them. Make sure another thing that can help is like having sort of a list of things that you should have, or like finding lists online for international travel, or like recommended lists, so you can see you have all of that. Make sure you know your airline's policies on what you're allowed to take onto the airplane, what you're allowed to put in sort of like checked baggage versus carry-on baggage. There's a big you have to be careful of lotions, like hair products, all of that. So make sure that, again, if there are hair products that you can't buy in the other country, you need to take from home, make sure that you can take them and that they're packed properly in their checked baggage. They don't explode all over your clothes, etc., etc. Make sure that you're bringing both formal and casual clothing. So if there are more important sort of formal events, you're going to have that. Definitely have some cash on hand upon arrival, even if societies that are becoming cashless, they're not cashless yet. So there will be smaller places where they don't take cards, they don't take Apple Pay. Maybe your phone is out of charge, maybe you don't have your card with you, maybe your card doesn't work there. Definitely good to have some cash on hand, especially when you arrive. Make sure you know what the weather or climate for the country you're going to is. For example, like, I don't know, if you're going to even London, for example, and all you have is like sunny summer dresses and no raincoats, like that might not be the best idea. Make sure that you have extra clothing, just so you know that if you need to layer up clothing, if you need to, it gets really cold, you have there, you have enough clothing there. And then another thing is packing shoes. Shoes can add up a lot of weight in your luggage, and you do have a limit. And when you're going somewhere for like a long time, it can get really easy to get carried away and be like, oh, I want to pack this, that. Make sure you know how much weight you're getting to. Make sure you don't have too much stuff that you might not even use there. Checked baggage has a weight limit. Definitely, generally it's 50 pounds, 23 kilos, but every airline can be different. So definitely check it online. Always leave a couple pounds under the weight limit, because another thing you have to think about is like you might be getting things back. When you're weighing it, it might be problematic. And sometimes airlines make you pay like 50 to 100 per extra pound. Like it can be a lot of money if you cross that limit. So make sure you know how much that is as well if you're crossing it. Make sure that carry-on bags don't have weight limits, but they have to fit in the bin overhead. And also you are carrying them everywhere. So make sure, you're not weighing it down too much. And most airlines allow one carry-on luggage and a personal item. A personal item can be a bag, computer bag, or like a small purse. I am somebody who travels a lot of cameras, so I have like a camera computer bag, and that could be a good way of like transporting multiple things with just that personal item. But definitely don't think that's another carry-on, because a carry-on is like proper luggage. If you show up with 2 carry-ons, they're not going to let you in, or they will charge you more. So another important thing is keeping important items in your carry-on. So if you're like just putting cash in different places, definitely have some cash in your carry-on in case your luggage gets left at the airport, gets transported another place. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but if it does, you have money and you will be fine. And other things like medication that you need all the time, make sure you can take it with you. Make sure it's allowed to be, you can take it to the host country. There are no regulations against it. And if you need it like in the airplane, maybe make sure that you can take it in your hand, carry on luggage. A lot of times people have this problem with inhalers and stuff like that, and some airlines do have very specific policies with what kind of things they allow. So make sure that you know that your medicine can be taken or not.
Yeah. Another important thing about carry-ons that I highly recommend is just bringing one change of clothes. So maybe just a fresh top, some underwear, socks in your carry-on, just in case like your luggage does get lost or delayed, or something that you have, fresh pair of clothes to wear with you, something that won't take up too much space in your carry-on, but just to have in case of an emergency. Again, always have your passport, your boarding pass, your university acceptance letter, if that's applicable to your situation, just in case you need it. And this way they will be handy. Do not put them in your checked luggage. So in your carry-on or personal item is where they need to go. So medication. This is a very important topic, especially for any students or travelers who do need to bring medication with them if they're on a prescription that needs to be, daily or something like that, or administered to them. So before you go, do your research on the medication that you're taking and its in-country legality. So many prescription drugs in the US may be considered controlled substance or something like that in another country, and they are not legal. You can't have your medication sent to you through the mail by like your parents. There are lots of firm restrictions against that, pretty legal usually. And so please bring enough for the semester that you're going to be there. You should consult with your doctor or whoever is prescribing your medication about the specific medication that you take, and try to get a list of comparable generic names, including their dosage and composition, in case there's a need for a refill while you're in country. Oftentimes, if you need multiple months of a medication, you will need to contact your physician and insurance to make sure that the quantity Because, quite often you're only being prescribed a 30-day supply, but if you need a 90 or 120-day supply, you need to consult with your insurance to make sure that it'll be covered and that your doctor will allow for that amount. Plan to travel with some sort of medical documentation, again, in case you lose your medication while you're there or you need to get a refill. So have your prescription, a letter and a copy translated into the host language if possible, and try to get it certified if you can. So like a notary stamp or something on there. So get that from your prescribing doctor with their contact information, your diagnosis, the treatment, and your medication regimen. The name of the prescription on the container should also match what's on your passport, and keep all of these documents with you for your return to the US as well. When you're leaving, your medication should be packed in its original container with your name on it. And you can't combine all your medication together in one big bottle just to save space. If you try to go through TSA with a big bottle of multiple pills, that's not going to go down very well. So make sure that you have what you need with you. I generally recommend taking your medication with your prescription and your medical documentation with you in your carry-on, because again, TSA sees a suitcase with, lots of pills in it, might be taken just for examination. And then once you're in country, make sure that the pharmacies in the other countries will fill your prescription. So you may need to get in contact with a physician there who will write a prescription for you so that you can fill it at the pharmacy in that location. If you end up requiring a refill while you're abroad, a local doctor has to be seen to get a similar prescription. So you might need to set up an appointment. And it's also very important to have a letter from your US doctor that I mentioned previously during this appointment, explaining the diagnosis, the treatment, and medication. So the local physician will need to confirm that the traveler's your diagnosis, before issuing the prescription. So this is very, very important if you are taking a medication that needs to be refilled or you need multiple doses while you're there. Again, if you're someone who has a medication that needs to be like refrigerated, I recommend that as a personal item for those students, that they bring like a little lunchbox cooler. Obviously, you can't take liquids with you onto the flight, but once you're like in the airport past security, you can go to like a restaurant or something and ask for ice to put in that container. And quite often the flight attendants on the plane will also be very accommodating to make sure that they can continue to give you ice or something cold to keep your medication cool. So, tips for being at the airport. Again, if you're on an international flight, we highly recommend arriving at least 2 hours before your scheduled departure time. This will give you time to check your luggage, make sure that it's not overweight or that you don't have to shift things around and get through security, as well as have time to find your gate. Quite often, airports that have international flights out of them are quite large and have different terminals. So making sure that you know where your terminal is, where departure is, and if you're at gate 28 and and you have to get from gate 1 to gate 28, it could be a very, very far way, or you may have to take an airport tram or railway to get to where you're supposed to be. Once you're in the airport, make sure that you have your boarding pass, your identification, and all of your important documents easily accessible. I know that we've said this multiple times, but we cannot stress enough how important it is to have those things in your possession and where you can get it. Again, know where your gate is, especially if you are someone who's going to have a layover or has to go between different terminals. So say you're going on a domestic flight from Miami to New York and then an international flight from New York to Paris. knowing the difference between departures, international, domestic, arrival, and where those are, where your gate is going to be. Quite often when you go to the airport, you may see terminal A through E, and terminals A, B, C do domestic flights, and D and E are international, and making sure that, you know, your flight is through, again, Lufthansa, and they're in terminal E. So making sure that you get to the correct terminal where you're supposed to be to get your flight. So doing this research in advance will also help you to cut down any sort of like stress or panic when you get to the airport, especially if this is like your first time flying or traveling. Try to do as much research in advance to just make the process easier. Again, security's do's and don'ts. I say bring a pair of comfortable shoes that are easy to slide on and off. Because when you're in security, you're going to have to take them off. Quite often when you're going through the security scanners, you're going to need to put your carry-on personal item, electronics, and any sort of metals that go through the scanner. So I say try to limit that as much as possible. Wear comfortable clothing, maybe things that don't require a belt or you know, too much jewelry that you're going to have to take off and put through the scanner. This will help you get through security more quickly, as well as like cut down on any sort of need to have to talk to TSA any longer than possible. Again, liquids should be in a plastic baggie about yay big that is clear, 3 ounces or less. You can buy a lot of those travel size items at like a CVS, Walgreens, Target, even the supermarket usually has like small travel size items that are TSA pre-approved. So it's just good to have those, again, in your little plastic clear baggie to just avoid having any sort of issues with TSA. You can't bring a water bottle through, again, because that goes over the 3 ounces. But if you have like a personal water bottle that you want to use that's empty, you can bring that, and there are quite often fountains and stuff like that within the airport where you can refill it once you've gotten through security and are in the actual airport space. Some places have scanners where not only do you have to take off your shoes, but you have to go into like, it looks like a little booth. You have to raise your hands above your head, and it does like a scan around your body. They will provide information and instructions on how to go through that. So don't panic or feel stressed out. It's something that everybody has to do. Quite often TSA does perform random checks. So they might ask you to step out of line and just kind of like scan you with the wand front and back. Again, don't feel stressed out. Quite often it is just a random check and something that you'll have to do, and then they'll get you right on your way to go through the terminal. Again, like we said, arrive at the airport 2 hours early and consider adding extra time in between. So if you have a layover, I suggest having at least an hour and a half, 2 hours of a layover just to make sure that you can get from one terminal to the next. Maybe get yourself some food in between. If you do have a layover or a connecting flight, making sure to ask if you have to pick up your luggage before and then check into a new flight. So that's something that's very important. A lot of times if you have a connecting flight, they will forward your luggage to your last destination, but it is important to check to make sure that that's what they're going to do when you're checking your luggage in. If you have to travel, I would also add like an extra 30 minutes to find, you know, the bus that you're going to go on. And then if that bus ride is like 45 minutes, so that's like an hour and 15 minutes altogether for that extra travel time. So just being aware of timing and how much things are actually going to take, because like if you have a connecting flight and there's like 30 minutes, that's a lot of crunch time between getting off of the plane and finding, you know, your next terminal or gate or where you have to be. Oops. Sorry, we seem to have some sort of technical difficulty real quick. Okay, and last but not least, just learning from others. Again, if you're traveling for the first time, it might be very stressful. So I would say, look to others who are around you, kind of see what they're doing. There's also a lot of resources online about traveling abroad. So, look at other people's experiences. You can go on YouTube. I like Reddit as well. There's a lot of travel blogs and study abroad guides. So just try to do whatever you can to prepare in advance and get as much information and resources that you need. And with that, that is the conclusion of our presentation. We thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well as pause the recording, and we will open up for question and answer. So thank you all again for joining us, and we look forward to answering any of your questions.